All right, in order to begin our conversation about marginal cost, what I want to do is I want to go back to what we did in Unit 1, where we took a table of costs and we calculated, given different quantities, we identified the fixed cost, the variable cost, the total cost, and then we identified the marginal cost. So what I've given you here is I've given you the fixed costs when we produce 0 units, and I've given you the variable costs for all of the units from 0 up to 10. And what I want you to do right now is, in just a minute, I want you to pause the video and I want you to fill in fixed costs, and I also want you to fill in for total cost, if you can try and remember the procedure, how these things are related to each other. Okay, so you go ahead and fill it in, and then I'm going to put a break in the video, and then I'll fill it in. All right, so what I've done here is I've gone ahead and filled in for the fixed cost and the total cost, and I want to remind you that fixed cost, remember, it's fixed. Fixed means not moving, not changing, right? So you can see here I filled in the same number, 55, for all of the quantities, because as quantity changes, the company still has to pay the same amount in their fixed costs. Then over here, I don't know if you remember how to calculate total cost, hopefully you do, but remember that total cost is equal to fixed cost plus variable cost. And therefore, what we've done, or what I've done here, is I've added 55 plus 0 is 55. 55 plus 38 is 93. So all I did for this entire column is I just added the fixed cost and variable cost, and this is what we have. Now what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video again, and I want you to try and identify the marginal cost of each unit. The marginal cost of the first, the marginal cost of the second, the marginal cost of the third. Hopefully you remember how to do that. If you don't, we're going to review it in just a minute. But go ahead and pause the video, and then I'll break the video and I'll fill it in. All right, so now check your answers. See if you got the correct marginal cost for each one of these units. And hopefully you remembered how to do that. But if you don't remember, let me explain how I got each one of these numbers. Remember that marginal cost is the increase in total cost for that particular unit. So as we go from 0 up to 1, how much did total cost increase by? Okay, total cost went from 55 up to 93. So if we do 93 minus 55, we get 38. The marginal cost of the second unit, we're going to have to do 129 minus 93, which is 36. And so on, all the way down to 450 minus 400 is 50. But I want to give you two concepts in order for you to understand marginal cost. There's two concepts that I want you to write down. The first one is this, is that marginal cost can actually be determined by both total cost, and you can also determine marginal cost by variable cost. Here's what I mean. I can go into a huge mathematical explanation, but basically I just want to show you here that you can find marginal cost by doing the exact same thing that you did with total cost. Okay? You can go to variable cost, and if you do 38 minus 0, you get 38. 74 minus 38 is 36. All the way down here, 395 minus 345 is 50. Now, we didn't talk about this previously because previously all we were trying to do was define marginal cost. Now we're trying to better understand marginal cost. And in order to do that, the first thing I want to tell you is that variable cost is the thing, let's just say is the thing that accounts for change in total cost. So if we're calculating marginal cost because we want to see how much total cost is changing by. Well, that's not happening because of fixed cost, because fixed cost isn't changing. The only thing accounting for a change in total cost is variable cost. All of the change in total cost is being accounted for by change in variable cost. And therefore, you can just use the thing that's changing to determine your marginal cost. So, first concept, that marginal cost can be determined by either total cost or variable cost. That's the first thing. The second thing I want you to understand, now that we understand that there is a relationship here, let me get rid of this stuff for now. Now that we understand that there is a relationship between variable cost and marginal cost, I actually want to show you what that relationship is. And that is this, is that variable cost is equal to the sum of all marginal cost. Well, all marginal cost up to that point. And here's what I mean, is you can, for the 0th unit, you can add up all the marginal cost and you'll get the variable cost. Since there is no marginal cost in the 0th unit, variable cost is 0. But now, if we go to the 1st unit, you can sum up all of the marginal costs up to that point, up to 1. And that's really, there's only one of them. There's 38. And 38 added up is 38. But now when we get down to a quantity of 2, if we want to understand the variable cost, we can calculate the variable cost by adding up marginal cost, or all of the marginal costs up to that point. And 38 plus 36 is 74. If we want to know the variable cost of the 3rd unit, we can add up the first 3 marginal costs. 38 plus 36 plus 34 is equal to 108. And here's what I mean by that. That variable cost is equal to the marginal cost of the 1st unit plus the marginal cost of the 2nd unit plus the marginal cost of the 3rd unit. And if we were to say, what is the variable cost of the nth unit? We're going to put a little n down here. We would then add up, everything up to the marginal cost of the nth unit. So, if we wanted to know the marginal or the variable cost of the 7th unit, then we would add up marginal cost of the 1st unit plus the marginal cost of the 2nd unit plus the marginal cost of the 3rd unit, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th unit. And if you added all those up, you would have the variable cost of the 7th unit. Okay? And so this is, if you can understand this, then we can then move on to understanding average variable cost and then average total cost. All right, so now that we have reviewed our costs, and in particular marginal cost, we now can get an idea of what the shape is of the marginal cost curve on the dollars per unit graph. All right. Now, before we look at this, I want to quickly review the law of increasing opportunity costs with you. Now, this is just kind of paraphrased, but here's the basic idea. That the marginal cost of continuing the same activity or behavior tends to increase the more you continue. Okay, so I'm going to put some parentheses in here. The marginal cost of continuing the same activity or behavior. Marginal cost tends to increase. That's what I'm trying to give you here. That as you continue doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, it's going to become more and more and more costly to do that thing. Okay? So for example, let's say that your alarm goes off at 6:30 in the morning and you decide that you want to stay in bed. Okay? Well, the cost of staying in bed, let's say for an extra 5 minutes, isn't that great. You could probably stay in bed for 5 minutes, and the worst thing that's going to happen is you're not going to be able to eat your breakfast at the kitchen table. Okay, maybe you're going to have to, let's say you're going off to school, you're going to have to pick up your breakfast and carry it out the door with you. Okay, so now let's say that you want to sleep in another 5 minutes. Well, now you're not going to be able to eat your breakfast at the table, and you may actually not be able to brush your teeth. Now, that could be bad for you if you continue doing that, because then you can get cavities and stuff. And now if we keep pushing that time to 15 minutes, then 20 minutes, 25, 30 minutes, eventually you're going to miss the bus, or you're going to, you're just not going to make it to class on time. And if you stay in bed until 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, because you keep pushing that benefit of staying in bed, eventually you could get kicked out of school, you can lose your job, and those are huge costs that are going to affect your life. And so as you continue persisting in that same activity or behavior, the little extra costs of getting that benefit are getting larger and larger and larger and larger. And so the marginal cost, the little bit of extra costs of continuing that behavior are going to get larger and larger and larger and larger. Okay? And if we look over here at this at this cost schedule for this business, you can see that at first, their marginal cost is decreasing. Look, 38 for the first unit, down to 36 for the second unit, down to 34, and then down to 32. Now, let me explain what this region is called. The region in which marginal costs are decreasing, and that usually happens in the first several production units. That is called economies of scale. And what that means is this. Scale means that you haven't used up all of your fixed capital. Okay, you're not using it to its fullest potential. Or maybe you have an employee who's capable of producing 4, but at first they're only producing 1, so you're spending a lot of money for that employee to only produce 1 unit. But as they produce more units, you're spreading out the production over the cost of 1 employee. But eventually what's going to happen, after you use up your economies of scale, you're going to have to start shelling out a lot more money to produce more stuff. So now the marginal cost is going to go up to 35, then the 6th unit costs even more at 38, then the 7th is even more at 41, then 44, then 47, etc. Okay? And this region is referred to as diseconomies of scale. All right? Diseconomies of scale. So what eventually happens after you use up your economies of scale is that your marginal cost tends to increase. And so at first, the marginal cost curve is going to go down. Then it's going to, after it's gone down for a little bit, then it's going to start going up, and then it's just going to keep going up. And so this is what a marginal cost curve looks like for a business. Now, here's what I need you to understand, is that in most cases, now we will in a few lessons talk about this portion of the marginal cost curve, but in most cases, businesses do not produce on that portion of the marginal cost curve. And therefore, oftentimes we don't even draw that portion of the marginal cost curve. And so what you see here, this upward sloping curve, this is what I will draw as a marginal cost curve. And eventually what you're going to see when we mix this marginal cost curve with the marginal revenue curve and the demand curve and then the other 2 curves is that they interact with one another. Okay? So it's important for you to understand that this is what the marginal cost curve looks like.